if I can have one little personal question. I asked you at FanFest if we would see chat bubbles in the future. And you said yes.
テストのサンプルの作成はやってます。もう実はすでに。
Actually, we've already prepared samples for testing.
この一言だけで多分世界中に衝撃が走るので、ここまでにしといてもらっていい
？I think just this utterance alone has sent shockwaves throughout the world, so let's leave it here.
今度はぜひ食事をしながらワインを飲みつつ、もっと長い時間ぜひディスカッションさせてください。
I think next time, definitely, let's go out for a meal, drink some wine, and have a discussion then.
Finally, the chat bubbles are confirmed. I got to go on the FF14 media tour. I got to play the Pictomancer. I got to make a Fem Hrothgar. I got to play the Viper. I got to see all the new zones. And more importantly than that, I was given permission to have some one-on-one time with Yoshi P. So come along, friends. A new adventure awaits. Hey, Dawntrail's coming the 2nd of July. It was amazing to be invited onto the media tour. I'm sorry for the deception over the last few months. It is the way it works. I have never been invited to the Final Fantasy XIV media tour before. I hadn't joined the game at that point when the last one was going with Endwalker. And my God, is it crazy. It's so different than everything I've done in the past, especially the secrecy surrounding it. And it was really weird because everybody knows that the people are on the media tour. There was even an advertisement that Yoshi P was going to be in Potsdam, Germany. There was a raffle to go and meet him, and people were like, well, the media tour is obviously in Germany on these dates. And then I had to disappear. So we faked a kidnapping. Because we can't use them in the darkest dungeon anymore. Do you know what I mean? Hey! What the fuck? Ah! But it was amazing. I'm so grateful that I got this opportunity. I can't wait to talk to you guys about it. And as you've seen, I was granted the ability to, in total, I spent like an hour alone with Yoshi P, talking about all kinds of things. We'll get there, because it was so cool. It was so cool. So how does the media tour work with Final Fantasy XIV? Certainly in comparison to what I've done for like Path of Exile, for Blizzard, for ArenaNet, and all these other major companies. They take it very seriously, and they want to, apparently part of the bidding process for like, because it's Europe, right? It could be anywhere in Europe, and they have teams everywhere, is who can find the best theme that fits the expansion. So similar to what like Blizzard did for Dragonflight, where they put us in like Dragonflight Castle, this one was like in the Biosphere. I'm going to say it wrong, because that sounds like Biosphere to us in the UK, but actually it's bioatmosphere is what it translates to, because I was very disappointed when we got there and it wasn't a sphere. I'm like, this is not a sphere. It's bioatmosphere. And the reason we did that is it's jungle themed. So what's really strange is that obviously Yoshida and Foxclon and everyone else are people that a very niche part of the world would give anything to meet. And I've seen people break down in tears just in the presence of Yoshi P. And if you were in Germany that day, Yoshi P could very easily have just been in the submarine. Apparently, if you follow the ducks, you might get left to Yoshi P, as they put us in this big room with security and everything, so nobody knew what was going on in there in this simple zoo-like area where it was taking place. But it was awesome. It was awesome. I joked on the coach ride there with the rest of the content creators, because I met some... I love this stuff. I know it's a privilege. I really do. But I met some amazing people. Some quick pictures here of what we saw. I will point out, it is under such lockdown that we could not take many pictures there. They did ease up later and they were like, look, you are under strict embargo. There was a really cool presentation by Yoshi P, where we will, which was all things that had been revealed in the live letter. It wasn't really anything new. But they were like, no pictures. You can't take any pictures of this. You can't do anything. It was like, okay, it's very security locked down. We all had press passes. Here we go. There's my special one. Hey. And if you didn't have this, you were not getting into that room. It was not happening at all. It was pretty cool. But they joked that, we're probably having tacos for lunch. And they're like, yeah, we're absolutely having tacos for lunch. This is full Dawntrail themed. So they gave us the full mix. So what happens? So we met up the night before. I got there pretty late, like 6 p.m. or something like that. We had some dinner together, and then it was time. We got on this coach, which was super fun. We've got a couple of pictures there. And then it was off to the Biosphere. I'm probably saying that wrong, but that's okay. And then we got into the room, and shortly after that, Yoshi P came out with his translator header and gave us a mini live letter, essentially, on stage with a presentation, explained what was Dawntrail's goals and missions. There were some really cool things in here that we touched on in the interview, and then told us what we were going to be doing that day. And more importantly, you're not going to believe this, they gave me papers, like a real Yoshi P papers. Look at this. I have actual papers. I feel live letter style, man. I've got papers. They let me keep it, which was awesome. In here was really cool. This actually has a basic play guide for like how to play the Viper. So it gave you all these screenshots and pictures of how to play Viper. They did the same with Pictomancer. So there was a lot of people there who maybe more story focused, and so like, you know, gameplay nerding out, which is what I like, is maybe not their thing. So it gave you like a basic start guide to get you going so you can enjoy the Viper and play it around. So the demo we got, few things about the footage you're going to see, guys, is that because of the Ukraine-Russian conflict, we were playing on the Japanese servers, but they had to route it through America. So you are going to notice some like weird lag, spell cancellation, things like that happening. A big example of this would be like trying to swift cast something. You had to like swift cast, wait, and then do it. It took a while for my fingers to adjust to that. So if anything looks a little odd in that regard, that's what it is, right? It's mostly lag and mostly the fact that you're picking up a level 100 job, and you've got a couple of hours to play. They did give us all day, but there was a lot to play. So it was like a couple of hours of Viper, a couple of hours with Pictomancer, a couple of hours with other things, and then you wanted to explore. The demo we got is very sanitized. Do not worry about spoilers, because they really cared about us having spoilers. There is zero story, and in fact, a huge amount of the like NPCs that would usually be in the zones in Dawntrail were just flat out removed, and the ones that remained, I did go and scout around, literally had one line of dialogue, which is like, welcome to Dawntrail. That was it. That was all they said. I had a look around, but it was gorgeous. It was beautiful. It's going to look a little bare. Don't be like, oh, wow, there's nothing in these zones. No, they took everything out. They wanted us to explore, have a look around at the scenery, and check the graphic updates and things like that. One of the biggest things that was really interesting, and this is apparently from the Western audience specifically, I found this hilarious, is because Yoshi P brought this up specifically, and then later on, the team, the Square Enix team, came around and asked us our opinion on this. One of the biggest pieces of feedback they've had about Dawntrail, it's got the double die system we'll get to. It's got new jobs. It's got a brand new big graphical update. The login screen's too bright for the West. So they came around and Yoshi P was like, will you please just like AFK on the screen for a while until the intro plays and then you get the full effect of the login screen happening? And I was laughing. I was like, really? That's the big feedback from the West, is the login screen is too bright. However, when they came around, they're like, Mike, have you seen the login screen yet? I'm like, yeah. They're like, can you give us feedback on it? I was like, here's the thing. In the room we were playing in, which was very well lit, it was fine. It was absolutely fine. But then I thought, wait a minute. I've seen screenshots, videos of thousands of people's setups at home, and a lot of people, certainly in the West, play in like a dungeon cave type environment, like no sunlight, nothing, like lights off. And I was like, you know, a lot of guys I know do play like real life on dark mode. So yeah, it probably is too bright for those guys. Because I know when anything really bright pops on my screen and I'm in a dark room, it's like, oh, Jesus Christ, right? We turn every website to dark mode to counteract that. You know, if you see someone using light mode in the West, you're like, why are you using light mode? That's really strange. So yeah, probably, actually, now I think about it, it probably is a little bit too bright. Which was really interesting. So, it is what it is. Okay. First things first. Let's look at, like, the biggest... Before we get to a lot of detail with the interviews, because I know you're waiting for that. Let's look at the biggest upgrade to Dawntrail, which is the double die system. I had to jump in straight away to this, because the double die system is a very big deal to a huge amount of people, including myself, who do like to mess around with glam quite a lot. Works quite well. I will say some of the menu was in Japanese, and some of the people that we had with us couldn't speak Japanese, but it worked super simple. It actually didn't go through tons of menus to make it work. Now, we didn't actually have the ability to glam our characters there. We could recreate our own character. Of course, first things first, the floor inspector must rise to the top, but we couldn't actually glam our gear. what we could do is use the preview system. So we could, you know, make the glam plate, but just not apply it to our characters, which was fine. And the double die system works in there. Works super easily. In fact, it's got a nice function of just being able to save what you did as a theme. So if you chose like black and red or whatever it might be, it would remember that. So if you did it on your chest, you could right click your legs and it'd just be like, do you want to just apply the same thing? I would love obviously an apply all function. So if you've chose a color scheme that you want for your character, just do it to all your armor. That might be there. Again, I was like, what is this button doing? Like, I'm not sure. It does look though, I can't confirm this. I wanted to talk to Yoshi P about this, but they like kicked us out. Again, I'll get there. It looks like you might be able to save presets. So if you have a variety of color schemes that you want to apply to your character, it's like, oh, usually I roll black and red, but now I want to go blue and gold. That maybe it might save those color swatches so you can create like a palette of things you want to do. I'm not confirming that by any means, but it looked like the functionality might be there to enable you to do that. But as I said, I was planning to talk to Yoshi P about it, but we did get off track.
A living, breathing world that we're supposed to be in, and things should matter. Although I don't agree with their use of Lalafells as raid markers.
もう本当に生きる世界にいうところに住むっていうのが非常に体験できますけど、ララフェルをレードマーカーに使うのはちょっとどうか。
Reminder, Lala abuse is never okay, all right? The next thing I wanted to do was explore the zones. I really would. I would love to pronounce to you the names of these zones, but they're not easy, man. They're really not easy. They're in my notes. They're in my cool binder because they gave us all the descriptions of the zones, but they're pretty tricky. I get why they've done it because it's the theme of a new land, new adventure, but they're like Kazama Uka, I believe, is one of the places. The dungeon in particular that you're going to be seeing shortly. In the notes, in the binder, it says that the working title is Jungle Cruise, is what they're calling it. However, on the very next page, they actually have the real name of the dungeon. Now, this might be the Japanese name, but none of us could pronounce it, including some of the staff that were there. It's Ihyuka Katumu, something like that. So I'm just going to say the new zones. The new zones. I went and explored the new zones and was looking around to see what was going on. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. It actually allayed a lot of my concerns as a streamer in that too much vegetation and stuff actually makes the stream look bad, and it can actually be a bit of a problem these days. It's like, oh, the zone is full of clutter of trees and branches and bushes and things. But actually it was not as bad as I thought it was going to be from the previews we've seen in the live letters. It is beautiful. Waterfalls coming from everywhere. It's exactly what you're going to expect. For the big Yoshi smirk about the whole thing was that Dawntrail is a wonderful vacation from the horrors and nightmares that we usually see. And that's the zones they let us see. We didn't get Solution 9. They gave us 2 zones and the main city. And yeah, it's all very pretty and beautiful. But there was always a little wink and a nod when they were saying that, because obviously things are going to go absolutely horrible. But it was cool to see. It was very pretty. So next thing, gameplay, obviously. I wanted to start with Pictomancer. Pictomancer, from its announcement, was the the job that I wanted to play at the start of Dawntrail. I'm not going to be doing the MSQ for a while, because that's just a streamer thing. People want to enjoy the MSQ first, and then they'll be happy to watch along with a streamer. So for me, I always leave a delay in content so people can go and enjoy the MSQ and things at their own pace, and then I'll jump in later. I'm fine with being patient on that. So what I wanted to do was jump in with Pictomancer, play around with that story, level it up, and then in a week or so's time, jump into the MSQ. So Pictomancer, from the previous combat live letter that we got, looked a little weird in how it played out. So I was very curious to see how this plays out. The general theme of what this is you have these 3 canvases, and then you paint on a picture, which then sets up a bunch of attacks. So you paint like an animal. So that'll be something like a bat or a Moogle, and then you get the Moogle and bat attacks. You'll paint the hammer, which then unlocks the ability. And then, because what you do once you paint them, you have this cast where you paint them onto the canvas. You set up the ability, right? Then you render that image. And then once you've rendered the image into the real world, then you can utilize it in some way. So think of it like a 3-step process. Paint the image, create the image in the real world, utilize it in some way. That's the general process of how this works. So the actual stuff with the paints, like the actual paint attacks where you'll see like Blizzard and Cyan and things like that, which go around the little palette icon, that's more your filler stuff. And the orbs it generates, after you do a certain amount, you'll create these little orbs that go around the side of the palette. It's like 7 of them. These are more like abilities you'll cast on the move off as little fillers here and there, because they do a lot less damage, but you can fire them off straight away. So no big deal there. But the main bulk of your attacks comes from the things you've painted, and those are limited by charges. There are obviously, my feedback on this was that I had a lot of fun. It's visually astonishing. You know, it feels like you're playing Super Mario World. It's very cartoony, and that's fun. It's really goofy and fun, and they've clearly put so much work into the effort. But gameplay-wise, I did have a couple of concerns with it, and Square Enix is clearly aware of this problem. Painting the images onto the canvas, which is the step 1 of the process, with you get animal, you get a weapon, and you get a landscape, is quite a long cast. It's on the characters we played, it was 3.8 seconds, right? So obviously that'll be adjusted by gear, I imagine. But it was 3.8 seconds, so we'll call it 4 for the sake of argument. That's a really long time when you're in combat, especially as bosses get more complex, right? So you'll see in the dungeon, this is the first ever run I did of the dungeon, so we're going to be hit by a few things, it is what it is, and we're still learning the rotation. You'll occasionally see me still like reading over tooltips while I'm still sort of like fully forming the picture of how Pictomancer works. So they're clearly aware that this is not that fun and kind of a problem. So what they've done is they've made it so that if you're not in combat, these 3 pictures that you need to paint are instant cast, as long as you're out of combat. And that in dungeons works really well, because you kill trash pack, you can instantly just reform all the canvases so that once you get into the next trash pack, you're ready to go with your massive burst damage, right? That comes from utilize the weapons. When you're in boss fights, though, you do have to hard cast these spells. And you notice that, like, oh, I kind of have to stand here for nearly 4 seconds because you can't do it on the move. You can swift cast it. This is where my issue with the lag came up, because I remember I was talking to Scripe and I was like, it's weird. We can't swift cast the paintings to reapply the hammer. And he's like, that's really weird. But it actually turned out to be the lag. Like, I played for a while without getting the swift cast off, realizing you needed to do quite a delay to make it work. So bear that in mind. But you can swift cast one of them, which takes the like total cast time of all 3 spells from like, 11 and a bit seconds to, 8 and a bit, just under 8. But it is noticeable, and it's not very fun. That was the bit I was a little like, it's kind of a drag when you're in boss fights to have to stand there and do these casts. I know in FF14 some people are used to longer cast times, so it's not too bad. It was just noticeable, certainly compared to the Viper, which we'll get to next. The other thing that I noticed is that Dawntrail's made a big effort in job redesign to reduce the amount of button blow, because there are lots of jobs in FF14 which have been changed now for the most part, that like go 1, 2, 3. So you press 1, which makes 2 do something. So you press 2, and then that makes 3 do something. And you kind of cycle backwards and forwards. And they've obviously internally gone, why don't we just have this be 1 button that just changes into, instead of having 3 keybinds, why is it not just 1? So you press 1, and that changes into what 2 should be. And then you press that, and then that changes into what 3 would be. Great. Wonderful. Because there are lots of jobs in Final Fantasy XIV that work that way. You press 1 to begin a process. Because they need to limit the amount of attacks you can do with the, say, weapon, the hammer is the best example here. Because it's very powerful, it's very strong, and they don't want you to just be going like, hammer attack, redraw hammer attack, redraw hammer. So they've limited it with charges, which is where your filler spell comes in. They've had to use 3 separate key bindings to make the hammer work. So you have draw hammer, which you can press once, and then that's grayed out because you've drawn the hammer. Then you have activate and render the hammer, which is on the charge system. And then you have a 3rd key binding, which is actually to attack with the hammer. So you end up with these 3 key bindings, and this applies to the other ones as well for the most part. And so what I ended up doing with my key bindings is I was trying to like make my muscle memory work as much as possible, is I just was like, okay, we'll make hammer 3 to draw, shift 3 to render, and alt 3. So 3 was my hammer, and then I did the same for 2 and stuff like that. And it still feels a little clunky for me, is like 3 separate buttons to just deal with one aspect of the job. But these are kind of nitpicks. Once you muscle memory kicked in, it was totally fine. It was absolutely fine. It was just one of those things that I noticed is like, this could maybe be consolidated. Is there a reason that, because if I draw the hammer, I can't redraw it, so why doesn't that change to render the hammer at that point? And then that could be on a charge system that's waiting, right? But I assume they want you to be able to always be aware of how many charges there are. So I get why they're at this situation. It just feels like it could be polished up a little bit. But gameplay-wise, once you got going, and certainly for packs, it's super fun. Like, your character's swinging around like Mario Rabbids or something like that, smashing things to pieces, doing all that. Realm would be proud of the Pictomancer they've created. And also, there's a lot of scope here to create new things. Let's go to the Viper, though. Totally the opposite. The Viper was totally opposite. Honestly, my personal opinion when I first saw the Viper was, kind of very flashy and wasn't doing it for me. And I will say, I thought the demonstration they did on the live letter wasn't incredible for the Viper. It kind of looked like just loads of buttons were lighting up and switching around. And then I saw some that were like duplicates of the same spell. I'm like, what is going on here with this action bar? But in gameplay, oh, mate, great. Super fun. This was fine. The way it works is by just maintaining a bunch of buffs. I was a little worried about that from playing jobs and classes in other games that do have a lot of plate. I call it plate spinning. You know, when you see like a circus performer spinning a bunch of plates and keeping loads of them going. I was like, I don't really like plate spinning classes where you're just sort of maintaining buff after buff after buff. It turns out, though, when you actually play it, that at least 3 out of 4 of the buffs just maintain themselves. Once they're going, they just keep going because your finishers and your extra damaging spells just extend them. And that's great. And on boss fights, all of your buffs do this. So you don't really need to worry about it at all. As long as you're semi-aware of what's going on, it all does it itself. And you're like, oh, I can just actually be a full-on DPS once I've got the ball rolling. It's totally fine. And getting the ball rolling is kind of fun once you get used to it because you only have 2 buttons to mess with. And essentially, to get all your buffs going, it's different orders of those combos. So it goes like maybe 1-2-1 gives you some buffs. But then 1-2-2 gives you different buffs. But then 2-1-2 gives you the final buff, etc. That's how it works. And you get into a rhythm of what needs to be done. And obviously, the game also prompts you with light ups and things like that as the ones you probably want to press next. There's some visual. You can see the actual job bar on the screen with the swords that are coming out. The different colors indicate whether you've pressed 1 or 2. So you have a little visual aid to go along with it. So essentially, when you're in gameplay with the Viper, it's very just swishy, massive animations that are going on. But realistically, once you've done your first sort of attacks and got your self buffs on, the only buff you need to worry about is actually the debuff on the enemy, which is extra damage taken. Everything else just maintains itself with your natural attacks. And that once you do that, you can then jump into your bigger attacks, which work in a similar way. You just essentially have 2 separate combo systems. You have one combo system which sets up all your buffs, and then another far more damaging and aggressive combat system, which is either single target or AoE. And this was the spec I was probably within like an hour and a half. I did a couple of dungeons on this that I was fully focused on the gameplay rather than sort of checking back onto my spell bars while I was still learning what the hell was going on. A little bit of positionals going on with the ability to obviously render those positionals pointless for a little short time. Side by side, I tended to lean in favor of the Viper. I think the Picto needs a bit more time. I'm not a big fan of downtime. I'm impatient by nature. So if you're a Melee fan, you're absolutely gonna love this. Let's talk about the new dungeon. We'll call it the Jungle Cruise. Interesting, because a big part of Dawntrail in the announcement is that they're letting go of failure. We'll come back to that. So I was expecting something kind of a little different in the dungeon. It's not. This is actually a great introduction to the game. Certainly for people picking up Dawntrail as their first expansion. It is a bread and butter, classically designed FF14 dungeon in the same format we've seen since Stormblood. 3 slightly different landscapes per boss, so each boss and the area changes. So we go from boat to land. It's got some... This must be the probably one of the very first things you do when Dawntrail starts. I imagine this is probably like introduction MSQ very briefly, and then you're into this dungeon. And the reason I say that is you do have Urianger and Thancred in that dungeon who are playfully trying to block you off because they want to get to the city first. So I assume we're going to the city. So very similar to what we saw at the end of the Endwalker pre-patch for Dawntrail is they're kind of playfully having fun with their friends, and they're like, sorry. Thancred's like, sorry, friends. You'll have to take the longer way around. And then he like blocks you off so you run around. So they're goofing around and having fun. So I don't think there's anything remotely spoilerish going on in this dungeon. The last boss did prove very difficult for a lot of people at the media tour. I'll admit I died to it a couple of times while I was learning the jobs. Pretty simple once you've done it a couple of times, though, because it just has some mechanics that resolve at different times, but they're both up at the same time. So nothing like a couple of season players, what I've seen before, is you actually have multiple things happening at once, but they resolve differently. So you just have to know which one resolves first and then reposition for the second one. But I saw a lot of people at the media tour getting absolutely crushed into the ground. So something to bear in mind. Even Scripe died to this, and he wasn't even playing any of the new jobs. He was playing ones he was familiar with. So there you go. But let's go back to this not being afraid of failure. This is actually, honestly, out of everything they were talking about Dawntrail and the demo, this is the thing that got me fired up the most. This is the idea that for a while now, CBU3 has not maybe been doing mechanics and creative ideas in their encounters because of fear that people might dislike them. Or they've tried similar things in the past and people have disliked them and been unhappy with what they've gotten out of it. And what they've been doing is just flat out removing it. Anyway, I was super into this. So in the interview with Yoshi P, I asked him about this. So take a look.
まあやっぱりこう長年しかも同じチームでこう作ってきていて、で、まあ僕らも一生懸命ゲームを作ってコミュニティもすごく熱心にサポートしてくれて、で、やっぱりたくさんの人に遊んでもらえるようにさらになって、みんな褒められるのはやっぱりものすごく嬉しいけど、だんだん怒られるようなことはやっぱりが怖くなるっていうところがどうしてもあるとは思うんです。まず昔は本当に夢中で新しいボスバトル、新しいギミックを考えてやるぜ、もっとみんなに驚いてもらうんだ、だからこそいろんなチャレンジをとにかくしてきた。でその中でもちろんうまくいったものもあるし、プレイヤーの皆さんにいやもうこのレイドのこのギミックは本当に嫌いなんだって言われたこともある。でその時にすごい大事なのはその怒られてこのギミックが嫌いだったっていうものをやっぱりもうやめよう、もうこういうのを作るのをやめようではなく、本当はじゃあこのギミックの何が嫌いだったんだろう、どこを直せばもっと楽しんでもらえるんだろう、だからこのギミックをさらに生かして次を目指そうであればよかったと思うし、それが理想だと思うんだけど、どうしてもダメだって言われた、嫌だって言われた、じゃあやめようでこれを繰り返しているとだんだんなんて言うんだろう、無難なものしか作らなくやっぱりなってきてしまうので、そこがこうプレイヤーの皆さんを楽しませたいっていう気持ちはすごくいいことだとは思うんだけど、だんだんそのチャレンジが減っていく要因でもあると思ってるので、そこを今感じ始めてるっていうところがまず大きいです。そうだからこそチャレンジをしよう、失敗は恐れるな、失敗したらそれを糧にしてまた次へ行こうっていうのが僕が今チームに対してすごい言ってることだし、僕自身ちょっと大事にした方がいいかなって思ってるポイントです。
That's super interesting because you've always been so delicate, whereas other MMOs swing the hammer with changes.
On this note, I just want to say how grateful I am that I got the opportunity to have this interview with Yoshi P. As far as I'm aware, very few people globally got this opportunity. He did lots of interviews, but most of them were audio only because they were for mainstream publications. And I have to give a massive, massive love here to Jamie and Mark from the Square Enix PR team, who worked with me like all day. It's hard to word this. I thought a lot of people were getting interviews. I really did. And when I got there, and the fact that I got one, we've been talking about it for a while. I was really just impressed with that I'd got one. But it became very apparent early in the day because Jamie and Mark especially came to me regularly. It's like, how do you want to shoot it? How do you want it to look? Because they were filming it for us. And it turned out Yoshi P not only watches my stream, but he was very aware of a lot of the work I've done. You guys might not even be aware, but a lot of the work I've done with major heads of studios, certainly in the MMO space and in other spaces, be it Grinding Gear Games or ArenaNet or Blizzard Entertainment and the things I'd done. And Yoshi P was 100% aware of all this stuff and, again, had watched my stream. And it came down to... in Yoshi P's own words, it's like he was watching the stream when people were asking about comparisons between World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV, and my answer impressed him so much that he was like, I want to talk to this guy. And as you can see from the beginning, we got cut off. We could have talked all day, and when I came out, the guys were. There was text messages coming out of the interview room to the other members of staff that, like, yeah, as expected, Yoshi P is now interviewing Mike because they're just completely, like, they're doing the back and forth on the design of MMOs and the long-term impacts. So I'm not putting the whole interview here because it will come across. It's a little long because of the translation, right? So there's two wonderful translators in the room. So there's a translator for me, to translate into Japanese, and a translator for Yoshi P translating it into English on my behalf. So the whole interview is linked below. I think you're gonna love it. We talked a lot about jobs and where it's going in the future of FF14, encounter design, Power Rangers. Like, we had a lot of fun. And as I said, the team was like, you guys have to wrap this up, because we just kept going. We just kept going. And they're like, we've got one more interview to do. So again, massive, so much respect came from Yoshi P. I obviously respect the hell out of Yoshi P and what he's achieved with FF14. And hopefully we will have dinner and some wine in the future to really sort of nerd out about MMO stuff, because it was very apparent how much he was enjoying the conversation as well, and laughing and joking. So it was great. In conclusion then to the media tour, that's the main stuff I got to play in the demo. Obviously no big spoilers. Is this wonderful bag. I'm going to be giving this away at PreachCon. The tickets are still available for PreachCon if you want to come and meet some of your favorite content creators and have a great day. We'll link that down below. But there's an official Dawntrail notepad. This is apparently a very, very, very expensive picture that came with it. There's also a compass in here that's like sealed up. There's some really wonderful... I don't want to get too much of it out, but an official Dawntrail compass that works. We tested it at the event. It totally works. I'm keeping the hoodie though. Sorry. I'm keeping the hoodie. Oh no, I've knocked my thing off. That was my adventure into the media tour, my friends. It was incredible. And if you want to hear some wonderful things about where Final Fantasy XIV is going in the next few years, go and check out that interview, because it was pretty spectacular. All right. Thank you, guys. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.